So, what's the deal with cold in Deltarune? Alright, so for starters, I'm not just here pointing out the fact that the Snowgrave route exists. Everyone knows about it already. The reason I'm making this video is to ask why specifically it's the Snowgrave route, why the repeated sprinkling of cold-themed aspects throughout these chapters hold weight, and what the story is trying to communicate to us with it. I kinda get into two different sorts of theories here, and while not directly dependent on each other, they are kind of complementary, so take them together here. Well then, let's just get everything bundled together. Organize all the things I think are important to answer this question into one neat section. Beginning with the song Don't Forget, which is actually what got me started on thinking about this topic. For those with a spotty memory, Don't Forget is the song that plays at the credits of Chapter 1. I'll play a part of it now to show why I talk about it in the video.
There's a light inside your soul that's still shining in the cold.
I think the mention of cold here specifically is really interesting. Put a pin in this because I'll get way more into it later. Next I'm bringing up, well, the entirety of Noelle's existence. I mean, this girl and her whole family too really are so snow, ice, Christmas, everything cold themed, it's insane. Her dad's name is a reference to Rudy the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Her mom, while we don't know much about her, seems to be pretty wintry too. I mean, her name is literally Noelle Holiday. The song Cap'n Cakes plays for her is just a remix of Jingle Bells, and literally everything else about her. Plus, her whole relation with angels and divinity and such combined with snow goes neatly together because, hey, snow angels, and if I was just here talking about everything cold-themed related to her, I'd be here all day. Well, continuing on, another thing I don't really see talked about a whole bunch is the actual time in which Deltarune takes place. From the actual release date of the game to the reddening trees we see, we can probably safely say it takes place in autumn, also known as the seasonal transition from the warm summer days to the cold of winter. And just an extra thing to add since dark's like the running theme of Deltarune, I feel like mentioning cold and dark are very related to each other in real life. I'm not like a scientist or anything, so I might be saying this a bit wrong, but basically, light dispels thermal energy, making things hotter. And dark is the absence of light, so a room that's lit up well will probably feel warmer than a room that's not. So, simply put, darker equals colder. And those are all the main parts I have. Nothing else to cover, right? Right? Yeah, so Snowgrave. I mean, snow is literally in the name here, but let's back up a bit. How exactly does the snow route even happen? So, right after we recruit Noelle in Chapter 2, you know Noelle, the Christmas one, we have to backtrack and fucking kill this guy! But not just any regular killing, we have to ice shock this guy! Yes, much more humane. Oh, did you catch that? Ice shock! Also worth noting that this name is used as a Dragon Blaze's attack too. After that, we repeatedly have to pick the most ruthless options, again and again and again, while also talking to this weird little guy in the dumpster, until we reach our epitome of horridness and kill our dear friend Birdly. Well, not our friend, just Chris and Noelle, so not our problem, I guess. After we're done with that, we have to enter a sewer hole to shortcut. Later on, we get to talk to Queen about Noelle's condition, and she basically says, oh yeah, that girl's fucked. Blah blah blah. Spamton, you Spamton! Skip forward, yada yada yada, torment her while she's visiting her dying father, and boom, we're done. Alright, did you get all that? Now let's get to the part where I actually theorize stuff. Alright, so I'm gonna start with the basis of this whole theory. My belief is that cold and dark are working in tandem in Deltarune. And I mean both the metaphorical dark and cold and the kind we find in a more literal sense in the game. These two elements always seem to elevate each other's presence, much like they do in real life. For example, the Snowgrave route follows the series of the worst actions you can take in the game. The more cold there is, the worse the situation for our protagonists. The more distant your actions, the more despair they end up finding themselves in. In other words, the story gets darker than ever before when you act cold towards these characters. As for the more literal examples, those are pretty abundant too. When we backtrack with Noelle to freeze every enemy in our path, we end up finding ourselves in a dark cranny of the trash dump. When we find our way into a dark alley, we find the key to freezing the final thing in our way. After we have done our worst, bleakest action yet, that being freezing and killing Noelle and to an extent Chris's longtime friend and classmate, the action that with certainty locks us into the weird route. We enter a sewer hole and lead ourselves into the darkness below. When Queen talks about Noelle's condition, she insists Noelle fall into a darker yet darker dream. Even in the light world, when we're reminded of our actions, the screen turns pitch black. So that's already some pretty strong associations there. But there's actually one more thing related to this that I might have neglected to talk about earlier. So I talked about Noelle earlier, and I referenced her family too. But there's one specific family member of hers that I failed to go further in depth on.
Hello? Anyone? Is anybody out there?
So, December holiday, or well, probably December holiday. It's not been outright confirmed or anything. But there's no one else that the dialogue in the code, which I'll pull up on screen now, could really be. Although we haven't got much info on her yet, we can assume she's similarly as Christmas themed as the rest of her family. Her name's even more obvious than Noelle's. It's December holiday, for crying out loud. We can also deduce from the lines that she's trapped in some kind of absolute darkness. And I don't think it's any coincidence that of all the characters in the game, that it was a member of the Christmas-themed holiday family to be yanked from her normal life to go live in the goddamn void. I'm personally very sure her relation to the cold is one of the reasons why it's her that got left in the dark, even if it's just a thematic choice from Toby. So, what am I getting at with this? Well, to answer that, I have to talk about the beloved fandom boogeyman we all know and love. That's right. I see. No. So, as a wise Mr. Gaster once said, dark, darker yet darker. The darkness keeps growing, shadows cutting deeper, photon readings negative. Okay, the rest isn't important, let's just get to the point. So, if you've been around, you probably know the ties between darkness and Gaster. And darkness and Deltarune, and specifically the darkness that Death is enveloped in. Long story short, he probably has something to do with her being there. Maybe. Probably. Other people have made better videos about the specifics of that. But I think after whatever happened to her, he realized something. Making something darker than dark would, instead of just not bring warmth to it, would actively make it colder. So, there's probably other conclusions to be drawn from all this. But it brings me a pretty good explanation as to why the Snowgrave route is written as the Snowgrave route, and not like the Firegrave route or something. It's not just because Noelle has the greatest ties to cold than any other element in the game, and she's a key player for it to happen, but it's also because cold is a sign of darkness. Both Deltarune's literal darkness and it has a metaphorical descriptor. And while darkness is pretty damn important for the game in general, to say the least, the Snowgrave route is the darkest the game has to offer. It's a good thematic choice for the story and forms a nice connection between the elements of Deltarune's narrative. So, let's get back to Don't Forget. The reason why the mention of cold stood out to me is because of what it actually means for the game. In my personal belief at least, the song is a retelling of the full prophecy of the Deltarune, a sort of theme song for the whole game. Basically what will happen in the story told in a more poetic and vague way. Its motif haunts the entirety of the soundtrack throughout your playthrough, even before you become familiar with it. Especially in key moments such as when the Dark Truth plays or the Legend. With this, most people will come to the conclusion that the mention of cold in Don't Forget is an allusion to Snowgrave. But we're forgetting something here. Snowgrave was never meant to happen, as long as we are following the prophecy, that is. From what we can tell from Ralphie's reaction to the route and all the other deviations to the plot that happen, the Snowgrave route is basically us going completely off script from the supposed general line of events. So, that leaves me with two possibilities as to why there would be the mention of cold and Don't Forget. Either A, snow, ice, cold, etc. will be a major theme in Deltarune regardless of whether we go through with the weird route or not. Or B, There will be differences from the main route, but things will still get back on track and we'll go through with the prophecy just as planned, even with this little divergence we've made. I think there's plenty of ground for both hypotheses, so I'll make a bit of a case for both, and it's up to you to choose which one you prefer. For option A, it's not unreasonable to think that cold will become more of a major theme as the game progresses. I mean, with Noelle becoming a temporary party member in Chapter 2, as well as all the comparisons drawn between her and the Legend's Angel, it's a fair assumption that with her oncoming growing presence, so too will grow the presence of the thing most associated with her. Not to mention, Toby said before that her song's motif is one that'll be tossed around a lot more as the story unfolds, with us even hearing it in a scrapped Chapter 3 track so far. It could be that this motif isn't uniquely hers, but more so for everything Frosty, and as we see more cold themes around in the game, we'll hear more of it too. Additionally, it's not like it's only Noelle that exemplifies the presence of cold. As I said before, Deltarune takes place in autumn, so it's pretty probable that as we near the last chapters, things will get chillier in the light world. I mean, we're already getting rain in Chapter 4 if the 2022 status update is anything to go by, so who's to say we couldn't be seeing snow later on? Can you imagine how cool it could be? Imagine, in the final battle of the game, snow falling as you fight, finally enveloping the stage after only ever sneaking itself into the story beforehand. Works even better if you're in the niche group that believes that one of Noelle's family members is the knight, or that we're gonna be fighting Noelle herself at some point. But, coming back from all their speculations, it's just very likely that as things get inevitably darker in the game, things will get colder too, going off my previously established relation between the two. In B's defense, the Steam page does in fact say the game will only have one ending, albeit really confusedly. And for a lot of people, it would be more interesting thematically speaking if the element that embodies the character at the very epicenter of this route ended up just consuming the story whole only in Snowgrave, staying concentrated there. Where things would be regular had you not followed the Snowgrave route, they'd instead be filled with reminders of what you'd done in the form of snow and ice. Plus, I'd like to actually reference the lyrics of Don't Forget again. There's a light inside your soul that's still shining in the cold. It could be that this means that even if we do go into the cold, if we do follow the Snowgrave route that is, our soul will still be shining the same. We'll end up finding our way back to the same path we were always meant to go, even if we got off track for a second. In the end, there's minimal differences from the regular route, even if the context becomes different. To wrap it all up, I'll review all the points I made in this video again, just to be as clear as possible. 1. Cold is working as a thematic parallel for the story becoming darker in a literal sense and in a metaphorical sense. 2. Dessa's presence in the darkness she's enveloped in is in part because of her relation to the cold. Whether you think that ends up being an in-game reason or just a thematic choice on Toby's part is up to you to pick. 3. Fandom boogeyman Gaster probably knows a thing or two about the cold too, considering its relation to dark and in Dessa's situation. 4. The weird route is written with so much focus on cold because of the narrative ties between it and darkness, seeing as its metaphorically darkest route. And lastly, 5. The lyrics of Don't Forget imply that either the focus on cold will ramp up in the later chapters, or that the weird route will have the same one final ending as the usual routes, no matter how off track we try to go. So, that's all I had to say for this video. There were other things I considered including, but ultimately I ended up not doing so because I didn't really feel like I could meaningfully connect them to other pieces of info or expand on the ideas they were bringing much further than that which is already on the surface. I'm sure as more chapters get released, there'll be more to take away from these bits, but as of now, Deltarune is barely a quarter done, so until then it's not really possible for me to make confident deductions about this type of stuff. This is my first time ever having made a video like this, and it took me a good while to get ready, so I really do appreciate you having watched up until this point. I hope this can get people thinking more about this underappreciated aspect of Deltarune. I'd love to see other people elaborate on their thoughts about cold and Deltarune, whether that be in the comment sections or in a video of their own even. Hope you have a nice day, and until next time!